it's still fun to play him. You know, it's you put a character like that in a domestic situation, like falling in love, getting married, having a relationship.
Something shifts the moment he walks into a scene, like the air itself tightens, like you're watching someone hold back a storm that could break at any second. That's the strange power of Vincent D'Onofrio. He doesn't just play characters, he builds them from the inside out, layer by layer, emotion by emotion. Whether he's a terrifying Kingpin, a broken soldier, or something not even human, there's always something unsettlingly real beneath the surface. And what makes it even more fascinating? None of it is accidental. Every voice, every movement, every silence comes from somewhere deeper than the script. What makes a performance unforgettable isn't just what you see, it's what you feel without being told. And when Vincent D'Onofrio steps into a role, he doesn't just perform, he transforms the entire emotional gravity of the scene. That even the smallest moment feels heavy with meaning. The way Fisk speaks, for example, isn't random, as if every word has to fight its way out. That voice, that rhythm, comes from a real emotional place rooted in D'Onofrio's own experiences. They were connected through communication devices, speaking as their characters. And then something unexpected happened. Cox physically moved through the scene in a way that wasn't just acting, it felt real. Agile, committed, fully embodied. In that moment, D'Onofrio realized something crucial. This wasn't going to be exaggerated, over-the-top superhero storytelling. Because when both actors commit to realism, when they resist the urge to perform big and instead focus on truth, the entire tone of the show shifts. It becomes less about spectacle and more about psychology, less about powers and more about people. And that's exactly what made Daredevil stand out. Over time, that initial instinct turned into a creative partnership built on trust. They rarely disagreed on how scenes should play out. Their understanding of the characters aligned naturally, almost instinctively. When that works, the audience feels it, even if they can't quite explain why. There are factors beyond performance, beyond storytelling, that influence what happens next, and you wouldn't know whether to trust them or be afraid of them. Before the suits, before the power, before Wilson Fisk became the man everyone feared, there was something else entirely driving Vincent D'Onofrio. But instead of freezing, he leaned into it. He started searching, not in scripts, but in observation. He studied insects, their movements, their rhythms, not because he needed to mimic them exactly, but because he needed to understand alien logic. Unexpectedly, there was no grand revelation, no cinematic moment, just a strange instinct pulling him toward knee braces. Without overthinking it, he bought them, along with some makeshift materials that would completely restrict his movement. Once he put them, then came the voice. And again, it wasn't random. It was constructed, layer by layer. He pulled inspiration from different performances, experimenting with rhythm, tone, pacing. One influence gave him that stretched, almost unnatural vocal emphasis. Another added urgency, speed, unpredictability. And when those elements fused together, something strange happened. It didn't sound human anymore. It sounded off. And that's exactly what it needed to be. So now you have this character, a body that doesn't move right, a voice that doesn't sound right, and intentions that don't feel right. Everything is slightly misaligned. And that discomfort? That's what makes the performance unforgettable. But here's where the real tension kicks in. The first day on set, no one knew what he was about to do. Not even the director, Barry Sonnenfeld. There had been no discussions, no rehearsals of the character. So when the camera rolled, D'Onofrio just went for it. Full commitment, no holding back. Halfway through the scene, cut. Silence. Then a reaction that could shake any actor. Confusion, hesitation, doubt. The question came carefully, almost uncertain. Are you going to do that the whole time? And in that moment, there was no safety net, no backup plan, no alternate version waiting in reserve. Just one choice, stand by the work or abandon it. He chose to stand by it, even when the response wasn't reassuring, even when it sounded like it might not work. He didn't adjust, he didn't dilute it. He stayed locked into the character exactly as he had built it. And that decision? That's the difference between a safe performance and a defining one. Because what followed wasn't immediate praise. It was something more valuable, trust. The kind of trust where a director allows an actor to take a risk and see it through. No micromanaging, no constant correction, just space to execute the vision. And over time, that risk paid off. The character became iconic, not because it was polished, but because it was committed. Every strange movement, every uncomfortable pause, every distorted line delivery. It all served a single purpose: to make the audience believe that something wasn't quite right. And belief is everything. What's important here is that none of this came from playing it safe. It came from uncertainty, from experimentation, from stepping into a role without clear answers and building something anyway. That's the pattern. Whether it's a crime boss who feels too human or an alien who feels not human enough, D'Onofrio's method stays consistent. Start with a question, push it further than expected, and then commit to it completely. Because in his world, the risk isn't doing too much. The real risk is not doing enough. Long before the suits, the precision, and the psychological control audiences associate with Vincent D'Onofrio, there was something far more unpredictable shaping his trajectory. It was his first feature film. No safety net, no long list of film credits to fall back on. Just a director known for pushing actors to their absolute limits, Stanley Kubrick. Now, most actors walk onto a set expecting some level of direction, conversations about character, motivation, emotional beats. But Kubrick didn't operate like that. He wasn't interested in explaining the process. He didn't break down scenes or guide performances in a traditional way. Instead, he observed, quietly, patiently. He wanted to see what you would do before he told you anything. And for someone new to film, that kind of silence can be disorienting. Because without direction, every choice feels exposed. Every instinct feels like a gamble. But instead of waiting for answers, D'Onofrio leaned into the uncertainty. He approached the role practically. No romanticized idea of method acting. No illusion that he was actually living the experience of a soldier. He understood the difference. What mattered wasn't pretending it was real. It was executing it in a way that looked real on camera. So he focused on precision, learning how to handle a rifle, breaking it down, reassembling it, even blindfolded, getting the physical details right, the marching, the cadence, the discipline of movement. Not because it was glamorous, but because it had to be convincing. Kubrick planned to blend real military footage with the film, which meant there was no room for sloppy execution. Everything had to match, clean, sharp, controlled. But the real transformation didn't come from drills. It came from something much quieter. A moment on the sidelines, literally. There was a scene where he sat on the bleachers while another character delivered a speech. Nothing dramatic, no big action. But instead of simply reacting like everyone else, D'Onofrio made a choice. He stared off into the distance, completely still, but internally, active, engaged, building a private emotional world that no one else could see. It wasn't directed, it wasn't planned, it just happened. And Kubrick noticed. That's the key. Because Kubrick didn't tell actors what to do, he waited for something real to appear. And when it did, he captured it and expanded it. Later, in another scene, Kubrick referenced that exact moment. He didn't explain it in emotional terms. He didn't say, "Do this because your character feels that." Instead, he gave a technical adjustment: camera placement, eye line, physical stillness. But embedded within that direction was something deeper. Repeat that internal state. And just like that, a small, almost invisible choice turned into a defining characteristic. That stare, that unsettling, distant, emotionally loaded stillness started to bleed into every scene. It evolved, it intensified, until eventually it became the core of one of the most disturbing character arcs in the film. And none of it came from over-explaining. It came from discovery. That's the pattern again. D'Onofrio doesn't wait for a character to be handed to him fully formed. What makes this even more significant is how it shaped everything that came after. Because starting your film career under someone like Kubrick doesn't just teach you technique, it rewires how you think about performance. You stop relying on instruction. You start trusting instinct. You learn that sometimes the most powerful choices aren't the loud ones. They're the ones that feel almost invisible, but carry weight. And that weight is what audiences respond to, even if they don't consciously recognize it. There's also something else at play here: endurance. Filmmaking at that level isn't comfortable. It's repetitive, demanding, sometimes exhausting. Multiple takes, long hours, constant adjustments. And when you're new, there's an added layer of pressure. You're not just trying to get it right, you're trying to prove you belong there. D'Onofrio didn't approach that pressure emotionally. He approached it functionally. Show up, do the work, execute the scene, adjust when needed, keep going. That mindset, practical, grounded, focused, is what allowed him to survive that environment, and more importantly, to grow within it. Because by the time the film was complete, it wasn't just another credit on his resume. It was a foundation, a proving ground that established something crucial, Not just to directors, not just to audiences, but to himself. That he could go deep, that he could hold intensity without losing control, that he could take something internal, something abstract, and translate it into a performance that feels disturbingly real. And once you establish that capability early in your career, everything changes. Because now, every role becomes an opportunity to push further, to go deeper, to take risks that most actors wouldn't dare take, because they've already seen what happens when you do. You don't just create a character, you create something people can't look away from. By the time you look across the full arc of Vincent D'Onofrio's career, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. He doesn't chase characters, he reconstructs them, from the inside out. Whether it's psychological intensity, physical transformation, or vocal experimentation, every role becomes a kind of deep investigation into what makes a person, or something pretending to be one, feel real. Look at his work in Law & Order, Criminal Intent. On the surface, it's a procedural, structured, familiar. But what he did with Detective Gorin completely shifted the dynamic. Instead of playing it straight, he leaned into behavioral nuance, mirroring suspects, subtly adjusting tone, posture, rhythm. It wasn't about dominating the scene, it was about disarming it, pulling people in, making them reveal themselves without even realizing it. That kind of psychological play turned routine interrogations into something far more compelling, almost like watching a quiet chess match unfold in real time. And then you see that same fearlessness show up in something like The Magnificent Seven, a completely different tone, a completely different world, and yet he still takes a risk. A higher-pitched voice, an unusual delivery, choices that could easily feel out of place. And once again, the same moment of doubt appears. That familiar question from directors, are you going to do that the whole time? That's the recurring test, because every time he commits to something unconventional, there's a moment where it could fall apart, where it could be rejected, where it might not work. But instead of retreating, he doubles down, not recklessly, but with intention. And then there's collaboration, the other constant in his process. Whether it's working alongside actors like Denzel Washington or sharing scenes with performers like Tilda Swinton, he treats every interaction as an opportunity to elevate the moment, not compete. Not overshadow, but build. Because when the energy between actors is real, when there's trust, respect, and creative openness, it amplifies everything on screen. But here's the key takeaway in all of this. It's never about perfection. It's about commitment. Every role, no matter how big or small, becomes a space to explore something uncomfortable, something unfamiliar. And instead of smoothing those edges out, he leans into them, because that's where authenticity lives. Not in polished performances, but in the ones that feel slightly unpredictable, slightly dangerous. That's why his characters stay with you. Not because they're loud, not because they're flashy, but because they feel like they exist beyond the frame. And that's rare. So next time you watch a performance like this, don't just focus on what's being said. Pay attention to what's happening underneath. The pauses, the tension, the choices that don't announce themselves, but completely change how a scene feels. Because that's where the real craft is hiding. And if this gave you a new way to look at acting, make sure you hit like, share it with someone who loves film as much as you do, and subscribe for more deep dives like this. Now I'm curious, what's a performance that genuinely unsettled you or stayed in your head long after it ended? Drop it in the comments.